Absolutely, it does. Yes,
Okay,
100%.
I didn't remember that being read before.
Yep, no, I didn't remember it all either. We didn't have anyone online joining us. So no one said, Michael, stop talking.
So our recording had no audio?
The recording up to this point did not have audio. But
Do you need a recording if no one's online? Yeah, you still.
not need. It's not needed. We're not doing a public hearing. But to summarize, I was just recapping the project for 1011 Warrenville Road for the culvert replacement. And the first two questions that were asked were about how a culvert dam functioned and whether there would be one used.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thanks for catching that,
thanks,
Jim.
Jeff. Any other questions?
So can I just clarify? So the plan is just to take the concrete out,
Yes,
but leave the dam, including the stone dam that was historic.
yes, we're
And
trying
then-
to read.
And then, so what will the level be? The level that's below the current concrete?
No, the goal is to, if you go back to one of the pictures I have.
Didn't catch it though.
Of the spillway. So traditionally, you see the board across the spillway.
Yes.
That has been the level that the pond has been maintained at all the time we've lived there, 27 years. We do use that to control at times. If we hear a storm is coming, we'll lower the pond. But the goal is to have the riprap at the level that it has historically been with where the board goes across the spillway.
Will you still have a method for doing the control that you typically have in the past when storms are coming, or are you losing that ability with this?
We're losing that ability, which frankly was not that.
Big of a deal?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
And we would like to maybe widen the spillway area that is defined by the cement right now. Maybe 1 or 2 more feet, widen it at the pond end, and a more gentle curve rather than just this, the spillway that faced. Oh, I'm sorry. Of course. The spillway right now has a tendency to compress the outflow and accelerate the water, so we're hoping we expect the riprap to slow it down and just be a much more gentle.
The same width of a spillway, but just the riprap will slow the water
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it'll end up.
The-
That's the expectation.
That tracks with the conversations I've had with engineering concerning riprap, because of its uneven face will create small amounts of turbulence in the water, which will cause backspin on the bottom and slow the water down a little bit.
But a little bit wider at the top so that you have more of a gradual entrance to it.
That's
What you
yes.
said, right? Okay, so just a little wider there.
And where the trees are coming out, are you planning on doing any seeding, or are you just gonna leave it, or with?
It will be backfilled with silt and clay and then a cover of topsoil. And the engineers recommended just grass, maybe wildflowers, but nothing with a root system that might interfere long-term with the integrity of the dam.
Sorry, you're gonna say something?
I will after you, Chairman.
This is a good picture, because one question I had was how are you going to access the areas where the trees are going to be cleared? And it's going to be pretty large equipment, I imagine, so they'll be working off the road or driving onto that section of the dam?
I would anticipate for the tree removal they would need a bucket truck and probably would be operating off the road for that phase. The other phase with the excavator, I suspect some amount of work may need to be done off the road. But then right next to the spillway is our driveway, so the excavator may be able to operate from that location. Certainly for the majority of the work for the spillway and the nearby trees, I would expect the excavator could handle that from our driveway.
That's a state road, so if your contractor does need access on the state road to block it temporarily, they will need to get permits from the state DOT.
Okay.
I have a bunch of other questions, so if anybody has questions, go ahead. I'll save all mine,
Okay.
just to make sure I'm not overlapping other people.
My question is just gonna be, do you plan on mowing that area once it is seeded with grass, or would you let it grow naturally?
I think we would tend to mow it, we do now.
I think most dams, they recommend mowing, so you don't get woody roots that,
Do exactly what's.
yeah.
What's happening there,
Yeah,
yeah.
bore into the dam and kind of
Mhm.
affect it.
I do have some questions as well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very curious. I was very excited to see this project. This is essentially a version of a dam repair / dam removal. And that hasn't come to the committee before. So I see a lot of this in literature and my research as well. So I'm curious about more what the is anyone required to assess the state of the pond and the sediment and what's in it prior to one of these projects? Like, for instance, like, is there sediment in this pond that's very vulnerable to being eroded if some part of this process doesn't go as planned? Versus there's not much in there, so it's not as vulnerable to erosion if it doesn't go as planned. And I don't know.
So some of the regulations that are about, wetlands and waterways, is to prevent sediment being mobilized and like moving downstream, and
Right.
it becomes basically a pollutant source for wildlife or even for other resources. So I think that's Will's question is, was there any kind of assessment or is there any understanding of sediment in the pond? And or it sounds like you've had an engineer, maybe Earth Dynamics, kind of helping you design a construction sequence here in
The erosion control includes the option for a cofferdam if the water hasn't been lowered enough after the pipe is open.
Mhm.
The lowering of the water was expected to prevent as much reduction of the sedimentation back into the pond, because that's where it will go. There'll be nothing going over the spillway at the time. We have a pretty active maintenance program for our pond. We have aerators and muck control of the pond right now, just to ensure it's healthy.
What is muck control?
It's a treatment that's done by a company that myself and our neighbor
Mhm.
have engaged with to perform some weed control along the shoreline, muck control. Basically, in the summertime where we really don't have a lot of water coming into the pond is fed by a seasonal stream from an area of wetlands up the hill from us. That sometimes goes away by August or September. The muck in the pond is suspended and really has no place to move to, so we put the aerators in and treated the pond to prevent that from interfering with the health of the pond.
The pipe that's there, is that, just, because I think I lost track, is that staying in place and the riprap's being put on top, or the culvert is coming out? And
Yes.
then-
I'm sorry.
No,
The expectation was that the pipe would come out as well,
okay.
and just rely on the riprap to perform the current duties.
To answer your question, Will, with regards to at least like regulations of dam repair and dam removal, I don't believe that repair of the spillway counts as all the deep permits, because normally my understanding is if you remove a dam, there's a large amount of permitting that happens above my level.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that this does not qualify because it's not a change in, it's not a reconstruction of the impoundment itself, nor is it a potential change to the amount of water being stored and thus the amount of water released. I can go back through all those regulations because we haven't had one, you're right. But
Well, I'm just imagining if you lower the water to be able to get the pipe out without significant modification, you're gonna end up, if you pump some of the water across, you're gonna lower the water level a couple feet, maybe 3 feet. And that's it's gonna trigger erosion where the small stream is entering, because there's a pile of debris building into the pond. So you're gonna mobilize sediment as a consequence of lowering the water.
Mhm.
But is that what erosion control is? You know, because it's within the pond, it's not necessarily within the dam itself.
Well, I mean, sedimentation and turbidity are also,
So
That's
if
separate
impact
from-
the fluvial system triggering turbidity, is that the same as like not stabilizing the the slopes adjacent to your project?
right.
We often
there-
talk about it that way, like.
There's
support the
erosion
banks, yeah.
of washing material
Yeah.
from land into the water or a wetland, and then there's also, mobilizing
Yeah.
things in the water. So I think there's erosion control and water control.
Yeah.
The water control is trying to deal with sedimentation and turbidity. Yeah. Can I just, like, more administrative questions for you, Michael?
Sure.
And just like help me understand how the town approaches things.
Mhm.
My sense is there's no delineation for this site, even though it's a project that's in resource areas. And I typically am used to us having wetland delineations like with a project, so how does that work, or does the town allow that to happen? I'm just worried about the precedent it sets about folks coming in for more complicated sites. And they're aware that delineations are not necessarily required.
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly this is a very old survey, which had on the actual survey key marked the edge of the pond with this. So figure. And so this is the parcel on which the plans for the removal were done. So are you asking specifically about the lack of like a modern delineation by a wetland scientist of where are the wetlands on the site? Or are you asking about a wetlands values and functions study for this pond? Because both of those can be done, but the proposed work here is very akin to a culvert repair insofar as go in, fix the thing that's failing, get out. And so in those situations, we generally don't require a full delineation because you're not adding to the immediate proximity of the system.
Sure, I think, but let's
Yeah,
continue this
absolutely.
conversation. One thing I think is precedent.
Mhm.
A second thing is to Will's point on the drawdown, right? You could have temporary impacts and not knowing the extent of the wetland. I mean, as 5 people sitting in a room who have never seen the site, I mean, there's concerns that might be unfounded at this particular site, but there could be an important resource that we don't really understand from this very localized plan set.
Mhm.
And so we don't understand that there, and there was no site investigation, to understand there's additional wetlands, or there's a very important wetland downstream that really would require a cofferdam or an NDDB review, that, there's important species maybe.
There's wood
In-
turtles.
So I just think there.
Downstream.
Across
This
the-
is
in the
really-
wetland across the
This is more
street.
about the housekeeping and how these things are done, so I apologize to kind of waste your time with it, but I just want to, and maybe this is a different conversation, but
It says no, but like there's a very slight overlap in the project area from a NDDB blob, which I looked up, and is a wood turtle, I believe, from the Mount Hope River. So the
Yep.
way that they do it's like 300 feet from the river, because that's where the wood turtles most likely are found.
Mhm.
Not that they couldn't be.
And I would just say, even
Yeah.
a culvert
But just-
replacement, wouldn't
yeah.
that, I mean, you're altering, or at least temporary impacts to a water course bank, right? So I'm surprised that sometimes the town will do that work without
Well, they always get a wetlands permit.
they get a permit, but not
You get a permit, but you
delineation.
don't, so, again, this is a question of what is needed, right? So this is at the very edge of an NDDB area. The Mount Hope River is downstream. So in terms of why do we care about this project from a wetland standpoint? This is immediately upstream from the Mount Hope River. This pond impounds a bunch of water from up on the hills that separate the Mount Hope watershed from the Willimantic River watershed, catches it, and then releases it through the spillway. So there is a lot of value in making sure that the water that comes out of this runs clean and clear, that we don't wind up with regular sediment suspension, and that this dam remains in good health so that we don't risk a dam failure and the release of more material into the Mount Hope River, which is quite close. Yes.
So material has been released?
No, it hasn't, but these are large pine trees and we've all seen what windstorms do to those. And so if one of them goes, how much damage happens to the dam? What happens with this?
For sure.
In terms of temporary releases of water and suspensions of sediment as a consequence of drawdown, it's absolutely fair to, I think, add a condition of approval that would have the shoreline near the dam itself and the work area armored with hay bale. Even in the situation where the water has come down below the level that a coffer dam would be needed, is such that if water level does come up, a nice hay bale ring around the work area would prevent suspension upstream. And then as long as there's no water passing through the area during the work time, there shouldn't be water being carried downstream into the sediment, following restabilization with riprap. So if the sediment stays in the pond and then the sediment that is disturbed to lay the riprap stays under the riprap, there shouldn't be new sediment inputs into the Mount Hope.
And I have a question of understanding. Sorry. Am I incorrect in my understanding that the drawdown that's occurring though is what's being allowed to happen naturally? That you're not pumping additional out. This is a seasonal drawdown that happens every year anyways.
Correct.
Okay.
If we need to draw down more, the pipe can be opened and
But
released below the level of the pipe.
If things went according to plan, what you're expecting is that the water normally drops to the level it would, so you wouldn't be getting additional drawdown with your plans. It would
Correct.
just be, okay.
So that's a little bit of clarification. There's
Yes.
a pipe that's below your board level. If the goal is to get the pipe out as well, you do have to go lower
Right,
than
Yeah.
just the,
But he's expecting that it
Okay.
will go down far enough
that the pipe is exposed.
and that it
way.
does that almost every
Yeah.
year
Right.
with the fall.
Correct.
And that's, and so I'm getting confused between those two things, but I don't
Pipes
understand
embedded,
all of
you can
this,
see
so.
Here, is this iron? Looks like an old
Yes.
iron pipe. This is embedded within the lower level of the concrete slab
yes.
here. So this was taken, when did you start working on this with me? Summer, spring?
Yeah, probably June.
June, yeah. So back in June, when we had much higher water levels, you could see it was up to here. But you've got about a foot drop between the pipe and what was then.
And right now, as of today, the cement spillway goes beyond the board across the spillway into the pond. The spillway, the cement part goes beyond that board, probably 8 feet. That is completely exposed right now. And it's below that part of the cement spillway that is always and usually underwater most of the year. That is down below that now.
So if, let's say we don't get a dry fall, and you want to get this work done, do you have a plan for that? scenario?
That's where I would expect the coffer dam to be used to isolate the area that is going to be worked on, pumped out if need be. Well, if we're gonna use a coffer dam, I would expect we pump out some of the area to prepare to do the work.
Okay,
I mean, I guess my point too is just like the uncertainty. of
Yeah.
What's involved in
Yeah.
removing it,
Yeah.
because you don't know what's underneath there, and the
No.
goal is to stabilize the riprap, so you might end up digging a little deeper than the current pipe.
Okay.
So that's what I was kind of more meaning.
Yeah, I figured there was that, but I just want to make sure I totally understood the
I guess
picture
my
as well.
expectation is that any sediment disturbed would remain in the pond.
but it does sound like there is continuous flow from the stream through the pond down the spillway. Unless it's low,
Yes.
it is kind of a
Yeah.
moving system, so
Yes,
if there's,
on average, I would say a normal year, probably 2 months to 3 months out of the year. Around this time, there is no flow. actually, there is no flow if the spillway was working properly. We've actually lost about 8 to 10 inches because the
Because-
spillway is leaking. So,
Where exactly is it leaking? Through the concrete or on the dry stone to the right?
It's leaking beyond where the concrete part of the spillway is into the pond. That whole section is undermined. But even once it comes over the board, and overflows over the board, there are cracks and holes in the part of the spillway you're looking right now, that's
Yeah.
dry.
Mhm.
So did the spillway used to be higher? It used to sit
I'm
up
sorry?
here? Did the spillway used to sit physically higher, or because has it been undermined, or?
I don't think so. The extent of it being undermined appears to be cracks and holes in the spillway, which really had worsened after the first time I noticed it leaking. When there was no water going over the board, I noticed water leaking last year. It may have been the year before. Anyway, we had a drought maybe 3 years ago. And I think the spillway shifted down and created the problem to begin with. The following November, from the year of the drought, is when I noticed that the water was no longer going over the board, yet there was water coming out of the spillway, basically on both the left and right side of where the pipe comes out, that you're looking at. So, the repair, should prevent that. We had never seen water coming out from below this, or leaking through the spillway. If there was no water coming over that board that goes across, there was no water going over.
Do they yet have material planned to go under the riprap? It sounds like it's possible that they'll take that out and there's a poor base material there. And the riprap will need something better to sit on. Have they?
The discussions I've had with Earth Dynamics would be that they would demolish everything, remove it, put a fabric down, then silt and clay, and then riprap on top of that.
Okay. And have they given you an estimated time for construction? Kind of the demolition and construction?
2 to 3 days. Once approvals are all received and notifications are made. And I would coordinate that with the tree service that would take the 5 trees down.
2 to 3 days is always a good window for a project, because our weather predictions tend to be fairly accurate in that window at this point. So if we've got a 3-day project and it says very low chance of rain during those 3 days, you've got a pretty good chance of being high and dry the whole project period. I mean, it's New England, but for New England, you've got as good of a chance as you're gonna get.
We're in eastern South Dakota, I'd buy what you just said, but.
Mike, I noticed that the work is on 2 properties, and so I don't know how often. I guess I'm more familiar with Massachusetts these days, but if work is on 2 separate parcels, often there at least needs to be kind of a letter or something from that, a butter.
The applicants have, no, that's
No,
there, but in the inland wetlands application, both Mr. Dagan as well as his neighbor have filled it out and signed it, and their information is in here somewhere.
Yeah.
I'll eventually get to it, or maybe I won't. There's a second signature. All the way at the end. So yes, the Northerly property owners are aware of and approve of the work.
Has there been a site visit for inland wetlands to it?
There has not been a site visit for inland wetlands. At the meeting, it was noted that there could be one, and no one seemed to think that one was required with the scale of the work, based on sending that to you all. If you'd like to go see it, can. I don't recall that there was one.
No.
I didn't think so.
I'm sorry, your name again?
Dave Dagan?
Dave, on the demolition removal plan, there's a note that says that they'll remove the existing rock and reshape spillway as needed. I'm just curious about the reshape. Is that just, once they remove it, they'll be doing some grading, or hard to say?
The existing culvert beyond the spillway, that curves,
Yeah,
really has no solid base of rock or anything to slow the water down. So the riprap will continue into that culvert area to continue to channel the water properly.
And what's there now?
There are some large rocks, but it's just dirt, sand.
Okay.
It's held in place for the most part, but it's not as effective, I think, as a riprap replacement will be.
So it's a lot of moss in here, and I can see when we were looking at that previous before, this is a grouted concrete and rock
Yep.
For that curvature.
Yes.
It's still gotta go like 90 degrees to get
The
the
whole,
pipe in the
the whole
road.
configuration here is just not.
We wouldn't have built it this way today.
No.
Like,
Um,
really.
yeah, wouldn't have built this way today.
And the 90-degree at the end of the cement spillway, there's also a 90-degree angle going into the culvert under the road.
Yeah.
So.
Does your driveway feel like it's well protected currently and
Yes,
after the work is done?
Yes.
Just a whole twist. Huh? Why?
Yeah.
yeah.
Working with what we got.
I think that's all the questions that I had. Oh, well, but the size of the riprap, I mean, it's so I work at an engineering company, we'll often get into looking at modeling and all this kind of stuff, which is not needed, but I'm just curious, how would you know the size of the riprap that they're proposing?
The brief discussion we had was their initial proposal was to cement the riprap in place. We would prefer not to do it that way.
Okay.
So the proposal from Earth Dynamics was to put larger riprap filled with smaller riprap.
So no concrete, that's
No
the
concrete.
current application, okay, do you have a rough idea, they give you a sense of that size, what large riprap? is?
No, just so that water movement wouldn't
Yeah.
move it, that it would remain stationary.
Okay. In really big storms, do you see a lot of water pushing through there pretty hard?
Yes.
or- Yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact, another reason for the repair is the water is after a storm, the water is consistently going over the edges of the cement spillway and beginning to erode the south side of the cement spillway. Not noticeable.
The
To the-
bank,
to the-
the bank
to-
beyond the concrete, is that what
The bank towards the driveway,
to
the left side of that bank.
It can
Oh,
jump
that
this,
bank.
get behind this,
Oh, I
and then
see.
start.
Because the other side is higher, so,
So is it backing up at the road culvert too?
no, it's not.
It's going through there.
The worst
That's a
storm that
54
we've
inch
had has never, the water has never overflowed the culvert going under the road.
Mike, did you say it's a 54-inch pipe?
24 inch.
Oh.
24. I was like a 54 inch pipe, that's huge.
That's a
54
big
inch,
pipe.
you're gonna have to
A
do some
24 inch pipe.
That's,
Everything's going through that.
well, no, I mean, that's like, you've got
Boulders.
the whole watershed to deal with. Okay.
Yeah, like 24 inch. actually.
All right, thanks. I think that's gets to most of my questions. I appreciate that. Anybody else have questions or comments?
In the past, we've asked about planting plans and schedules and expressed a desire for native plants. So is there anything applicable to this project?
You could have the seed that's thrown on the dam be something like a conservation seed mix. But it is going to be mowed primarily, so
Yeah,
you're
that's
not gonna
what
get a
I
lot of
asked that.
wildflower growth, in order to prevent the woodies from getting back in there and causing this problem again in 50 more years. Other than that, the base of the little stream there where it drops is very rocky and is intended to be rocky afterward as it takes the water coming through. I don't know that there's a lot of things to plant in the limited work area. In a way, it's good that the work area is limited and not a lot of existing vegetation is being removed. But yeah, you want to plant a blueberry bush somewhere in the
Well, yeah.
wetland on your property.
I can tell you the conversation I had with the engineer who was giving us some guidance was, we're used to the trees, so kind of going to be dramatic to take those trees out of there. So I questioned, well, how about smaller, flowering trees? No. What about bushes? No.
Yeah.
Okay, I get the message. Grass,
Dam folks do not like
yeah.
anything woody on a dam, yeah.
Another thing that we have asked about is about the construction sequence. And so is it apparent, I apologize, I didn't look at the application materials, but is a appropriate sequence in place for everything?
So I want to get a full construction sequence from Earth Dynamics, before we, written out on the plan set before, or as a condition of approval for this, but given the scope of work, I imagine that this will be very similar to one of those, stock, construction sequences that we normally get, which is erosion controls up, inspect by Michael, work in good conditions, with addenda to assess if water levels are too high, and then cut trees, seed, backfill.
Okay.
Simple enough project, but yeah, I should have a good written construction sequence from the contractor before.
And I got one more when he's done scratching notes. And then we've also asked about adherence to Mansfield performance standards. And so those that are applicable here, given that normally we would recommend native vegetation,
Mhm.
that's, we're just gonna be mowing it down. It was already mentioned that smaller rocks will be used for the interstitial spaces for the larger riprap. So
Word
anything else?
interstitial.
Yeah, it's in the notes.
Based on my read of the stormwater control regs, this seems like it coincides with best management practices for stormwater control for something like a spillway repair. We don't have a lot of these, but based on how I read the regs, it seems like it's consistent.
Okay. Yeah, in lieu of reading the packet, I went to our most recent similar project and pulled recommendations from that one. So I'm only as smart as past Chad took notes.
Past chat.
Thank you, past Chad. That was it for my questions.
That term might stick.
Past Chad.
Good past chat.
Future Chad is another point of discussion, but yeah, current Chad appreciates past Chad.
Any other questions or comments or?
And just to clarify, so my initial statement about sedimentation, there is no knowledge of significant sediment in the dam?
There's no knowledge of what.
Is there significant sediment stored in the dam?
Behind
Sorry, in the pond.
in the pond.
Yeah,
The dam, if you can go back to the.
sure. That was the original thrust of my question, is what do we know about that sediment, if anything?
The photograph, if you're looking at the trees along the dam, I would say easily, if it's a very stable area behind the dam, the one that,
Yeah, that's good.
Any sense of how?
I'm just not really sure
How deep?
what I would be looking at in order to.
Like in the
Answer your
upstream
question.
end where the small stream comes in, does it look like there's sediment that has been deposited from the?
Is that a shallow stream?
So
Kind of
the
a shallow stream.
Yeah, it's a very shallow stream. This stream that comes in is on my neighbor's property. I've only actually seen it a couple of times. There is like what I would describe as clean sediment, sand, but nothing that is building up or adding to the surrounding entry of the stream into the pond.
Looking at the watershed and what feeds here, we're going from very much through the woods. Very little development upstream. I don't actually
The
know.
drainage area is not small, right?
No,
It's
it is
going
not.
up into Ashford. I mean,
Yep, so this is the top of the hill as far as I know. So you're catching a lot of this. There are some fields over here, but I believe these technically flow this way.
This is
So-
like, I don't think it's part of this. It's weird.
You don't.
This- No,
I'd have to
you
look
can
at
just
it.
look, that stream that they're drawing is this, it doesn't go in.
Okay.
I think this is all the same
Yeah,
wetland
just-
system, but I think
Very,
this
very-
just flows north and hits this pond.
So you don't think like he's.
From the DEM, I don't think that the hydrology is.
So
accurate.
Michael, this goes back to my question about a delineation and sort of a qualified field scientist looking at the watershed, looking at species, doing a delineation, you know, expressing concern if it's a 3 square mile watershed versus a 1/4 square mile watershed. And so
Absolutely. I mean, I think if the Wetlands Commission had ruled this was a significant impact, we definitely would have asked for a proper watershed delineation and study on the hydrodynamics, which is what we did in the.
No, I'm not saying it goes as far as, but I just think it's baseline information on any project to have a sense of like species, resource areas, even just a field delineation and sort of a casual functions and values assessment of a project site, because like we're looking at Will's LiDAR or the LiDAR to determine like what's the watershed size, and I guess if it's being replaced in kind, that's okay, but maybe I look for too much information, but I'm not sure we have. I don't feel like we have enough information to feel. I mean, I'm okay with it, but I think in the future, like having a more complete application would be desired.
Sure, so
That's my thought.
So in terms of the things you're asking for, looking for things like modern wetlands delineation, that's always fair. Wetlands delineations are after 10 years and expiration. Generally, when it comes
Let's
to.
let's let him
Sure.
go. We can finish
Yeah.
this up.
So let's do that. We can talk afterwards.
Yeah, but let's kind of.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So does anybody want to make a motion on this application?
Yeah, I've been trying to keep notes.
Oh, do you want to
along
send
the way.
this?
I just had a question for Mike on process. Expecting this to move forward.
Yep.
There are 3 notifications that have to be made, Department of Public Health, Wyndham Waterworks,
Yep.
and State of Connecticut.
Mhm.
When do I make those?
So why do you notify the state? What specifically, because of the water going under their road?
Is it a
No, it's a
jurisdictional?
standard notification that's part of the application.
Yes, you should send the notifications now, now that you've met with these folks, because that'll take you through, they'll
Okay.
get it by the next meeting, they'll have a chance to respond. Yeah, because Wyndham Waterworks, I can't imagine that they're going to be particularly concerned, but.
I had a
should
brief
send them.
discussion with them because I needed the
Mhm.
information, but and they said they'd be coming out, so
Great,
once I give them the forms.
right,
I
so
just wanna
yes, you
keep
can
things
send those
moving
forms
and-
out now.
in the process.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Dave, you're welcome to stay. I just meant we're
No, I
into a
understand.
whole different thing.
I-
Do you know if the dam is considered a jurisdictional dam by the state? Have you ever had like this DEP contact you about a safety
No.
hazard rating or anything like that?
No, I only know one other individual in Ashford that has had that notification. I'd expected it at some point, but I was under the impression they were working down from some priority format that they were using, and this
And
one
you're
really
doing the
doesn't
things that they
represent.
would tell you to do anyway, which is fix this away.
And I'm just hoping for no big storm so that the trees don't come down.
Yeah,
because
yeah, of
If
course.
trees come down, we don't.
What kind of trees are they?
Tamarack pines
Oh, that's too
and the
bad.
maple.
That's too bad.
Yeah,
Those are-
yeah, it is too bad. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Tree,
I've seen
yeah.
that. Yeah, you're welcome to stay. I just didn't wanna, I'd like to get your application sort of through our conversation. I didn't
Mhm.
wanna get you caught up in our other thing. So if anybody has or Chad, you said you wanted to
Past Chad.
pass. So it's gonna say Chad.
Current Chad made minor edits. So I'll move, that based on the applicant's plan and materials presented, replacement of the spillway and removal of trees on the dam at 1011 Warrenville Road is not likely to have a significant negative impact on the pond outlet or upland review area. Conservation Commission recommends the following for consideration by the Inland Wetland Agency. 1, the disturbance of natural vegetation, specifically trees on the dam, is within 50 feet of a wetland, but necessary to maintain the dam. Just felt like that needed to be said. Sediment mobilization is possible with pond drawdown due to unnamed stream that flows into the pond, and removal of spillway pipe and installation of new spillway. a question, is sediment mobilization of dam and spillway replacement an erosion control or water control issue? I think that was part of the
Can you say
conversation.
that again?
Is sediment mobilization of dam and spillway replacement an erosion control or water control issue? Question mark. This is a consideration for IWA. And what is precedent? Question mark. Well, does that capture the gist of the things that you were saying, or I'm happy to revise that?
I don't know if we need that in the notes, but if Will, you want it in there, I mean, I think it's just sort of a language thing. Some things are water control and then other things are erosion control.
That, I was more asking to get a sense of the.
So it's not necessary
I
to
don't think
put
it's
forward to
necessary.
IWA. So we'll just leave it, we'll strike those two and just leave it at the sediment mobilization as possible. Part.
But can you go, what was the precedent question related to?
I thought that was regarding sediment mobilization.
Well, you brought up precedent when it had more to do with going forward without a upland review area.
Yeah, more on
Delineated for the
delineations.
entirety of the pond. Because we were talking about the project mostly from the standpoint of the impacted culvert area rather than the impacted pond. Which admittedly, the plan is to not impact the pond.
But there's a temporary,
But there's a
change.
temporary, change to it.
Does that make sense, Jeff?
What is precedent for upland review area versus spillway area?
Let's take that out as a separate item and
Yeah,
there's
discuss
just
that.
kind of it's a question I have for IWA and for the town about applications in general, not necessarily this
Not this
project.
one.
We can,
Okay, so I'm gonna move
Separate
that
that.
up into notes. And I apologize if I look like my head is bobbing, but these progressive lenses mean like every little bob of my head makes the text go. Yay for getting old.
It's fun.
All right, so that's gone up into the notes. So just an acknowledgement that sediment mobilization is possible upon drawdown due to unnamed stream that flows into the pond and removal of spillway pipe and installation of new spillway. Next bullet, an NDDB blob is indicated in the Mount Hope River, which is downstream from this site, making sediment mobilization a concern. It's recommended to armor the work area with bales during the work period. Next bullet, dam vegetation should be maintained through mowing to discourage woody stems. Future you will thank current you for that one. And a construction sequence, including water control and diversion specifications, should be submitted and approved. That I left by the design engineer. Is that applicable in this case? Mike?
Future plans will be construction.
could you read that again?
A
Chad?
construction sequence, including water control and diversion specifications, should be submitted and approved by the design engineer and submitted to the EP for approval at the same time.
Is the EP?
I'm the environmental planner. That's me. That's a short
Okay.
name for me. Design engineer or
The
principal
applicant,
contractor.
right? I mean, it
Yeah,
should be
principal
submitted by
contractor.
the applicant.
Or principal contractor and submitted to EP for approval at the same time. And then next bullet, use of Mansfield performance standards and BMPs as applicable.
Yeah, so you kind of have some conditions in there, so let me, I have written some of those. Right, you just said performance standards, right?
Mansfield
That was
performance
the last
standards.
one. And a construction sequence, you said that.
Yep.
So to me, I think the cofferdam for the concern about sediment should be a condition, like just, they should use the cofferdam, even if it's low water. God forbid there's a thunderstorm and everything jacks up in the middle of the construction period, so I would
Make that a recommendation.
I would make that a recommended condition on the permit. Also that the material before they put the fabric down, that material is compacted or at least assessed to be compact so that there's not further shifting once the fabric and the riprap are in place.
You're gonna need to slow down because I was typing the recommended to use cofferdam.
That Dave was saying that before they put the riprap down, they're gonna put fabric over the soil. And that they make sure that that underlying soil is a adequate base material and it's compacted to whatever is appropriate. To put the riprap, the fabric and the riprap on top. Just kind of for stability and again, to keep sediments from moving around. And the one thing I'm glad Dave was clear about the design. Sorry, I'll wait. I get carried away.
Well, so on the material base for the new spillway, there were two things that you said regarding that.
What do you have? And then I can fill it in.
Neither of those two things. I either recommended that the material base, because I had to find where to put it, for the new spillway is appropriate. And then I
Yeah, it's an
realized,
appropriate material and it's
Compacted.
compact
Before
compacted.
before the fabric is put on.
before the fabric is installed. Which is before the riprap is installed on that.
okay,
And that I just want to make it clear, because I don't see it in the plans, maybe it's in the application, but that it's gonna be, it's specified to be large riprap with smaller riprap in the spaces, just that we've got, I think, larger stone here is a better,
Do you want to
More
give an
sustainable design.
approximate actual measurement for large, since we don't have?
36
he
inch?
doesn't have it?
engineers
So
get
3
into
foot
a
stuff?
Okay.
lot of hydraulic.
I'm just saying, you were asking about
models,
what
and
the size was and large could mean
36
anything.
inch, like,
Is big. That's
That's-
the huge stuff.
yeah, I don't.
I don't think you need anything that large.
No, that's, I've been around enough people that they know what riprap size to
Mhm.
say, and I don't, so I mean, if the town wants to, you know, if.
I'll in the construction
Derek and
sequence,
those folks want to make a recommendation, but
in the construction sequence that we get from them, I'll get their.
yeah, they
proposed
should
sizes.
specify the
Check
sizes
those against,
in that sequence.
because there's DOT standard specs for
And-
riprap sizes for stream banks and stuff like that. And we just went through it with the previous stream bank and culvert repair that we did, is we just got that on spec from the engineer, so I'll
So we
make sure
just
that-
wanted to meet the DOT standards.
I like to specify this local route. No changing colors.
You'd be a great EP, you'd really be.
From the buy type
fantastic.
schist, I'm a buy type schist in place of.
You can make riprap out of biotech.
I know.
He's a
I don't know if we.
geologist. Do it.
can we just use the basic stone walls?
That's why Stonewall's
Do you have
look so
other,
pretty.
do you have
Yes.
other recommendations that I need to
Historical
know?
resource.
I guess that it's hard to, we don't see the driveway, we don't see the bank on the west or the south side of the site, so. Just that silt fence is installed. Or erosion controls are installed adjacent to work areas, between work areas and the waterways, because. If they are using the driveway to do work on the spillway, you know. You kind of don't see the rest of the bank there in the driveway, and so I just want to make sure that.
So the driveway does
Uh,
come through here, so the silt fence is intended to wrap the ponds and the dam areas.
So is a more detailed plan set gonna be coming to you for approval, or it's just gonna be the sequence coming to you?
It should be
for
the
approval?
sequence coming to me for
Alright.
approval.
So I just, a condition should be that there should be erosion control anywhere that there's work adjacent to the pond or the waterway. And that any sorry,
So I'm tucking this into the construction sequence, and so it says including water control, diversion specifications and erosion control, because erosion control was not mentioned.
I
Regarding.
want to be clear that the
construction
plan does not really show some of the work areas on site, and I guess if we can make a separate bullet,
sequence. Okay,
that if, because the plan doesn't show certain work areas that we're recommending, you know, that erosion controls are in between any work areas and the water bodies or waterway. And I'm sure it will be, it's just, the plan doesn't show that, and so I just want to make it clear in the language that we expect that to be done that way.
Driveways, yes.
Okay,
And one more.
okay.
It looks like there might be a couple of small areas that are bare soil when this is all done, so just that those all get topsoil, like 6 inches of topsoil and seed. So not just the tree locations, but there's gonna be edges along where the spillway's been ripped out that we're probably gonna have some bare soil so that all those bare soil areas get topsoil and seed.
Okay,
With those amendments, I will second your motion. Did you make the motion?
I did.
Okay.
That's a different motion.
Well, does anybody want to second it since I added all that stuff? It
Would
seems
you like to read the
seems
motion?
like a dictator to just second all my stuff. Does anybody else want to second that or make more changes?
I'll second it.
Oh,
Does anybody want to add anything to that or take anything out or otherwise edit? No, you guys are done with it.
You did such a good job.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, do you want to go through it again, or do you think we're all pretty good? Right?
I should have probably joined in and threw it up on the screen there. Sorry about that. I think I've done that in the past.
We'll do that next time.
But I can take it from the top if that would be
Alright.
helpful.
Sure, then we can hear it in sequence.
All right. So I move, we'll wait to see who seconds, that based on the applicant's plan and materials presented, replacement of the spillway and removal of trees on the dam at 10111 Warrenville Road is not likely to have a significant negative impact on the pond outlet or upland review area. The Conservation Commission recommends the following for consideration by the Inland Wetland Agency. Item 1. The disturbance of natural vegetation, specifically trees on the dam, is within 50 feet of a wetland, but necessary to maintain the dam. 2. Sediment mobilization is possible with pond drawdown due to unnamed stream that flows into the pond, and removal of spillway pipe and installation of new spillway. Recommended to use cofferdam even if low water conditions are present. See some verbs. An NDDB blob is indicated in the Mount Hope River, which is downstream from this site, making sediment mobilization a concern. Recommended to armor the work area with bales during the work period. Item 4, dam vegetation should be maintained through mowing to discourage woody stems. Item 5, a construction sequence including water control, diversion specifications, and erosion control should be submitted and approved by the design engineer or principal contractor and submitted to the EP for approval at the same time. Recommended that the material base for a new spillway is appropriate and compacted before the fabric is installed. Also recommended that large riprap and small riprap are used in this project. Erosion control should be between all work areas and the waterway water body. It is unclear from materials presented if that is the case. Any bare soil areas should get topsoil and seed. And last item is use Mansfield performance standards and BMPs as applicable.
Second for the second time.
Okay, seconded it.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Best wishes with your projects, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Thanks for your time.
All those comments are going to get forwarded to the Wetlands Commission. I'm going to take them and I'm going to integrate them into a draft motion with the Wetlands Commission. And then at their next meeting, they will consider whether or not there needs to be anything else.
Okay.
And if you've met all the standards there and anything they asked for, then you'll likely have it approved.
Great.
Steve, have you ever had
Okay.
beavers in your pond?
Yes.
It looks like there.
Michael
You
loves
have.
beavers.
Well, it looks like just across the road, there might be beavers.
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there.
there have been putts over there.
Yeah, so that's a lot of trees
Yeah.
knocked down. Yeah.
Oh, it's kinda-
These look like old ditch trails.
Have you
Yeah.
ever seen any, do you know what a
They
wood turtle
cause
looks like?
blurriness like
I'm
that
sorry?
too.
Do you know what a
That's
wood,
an
a
incredible
wood turtle?
power.
Do you know what those look like?
I'm not sure exactly what they look like.
Yeah.
The-
I mean, I'm sure you have
Value are
painted
turtles.
turtles, yeah.
I have a
Just
rock
curious.
that's out of the water in the back of our, the pond wraps around our house.
Oh, there's the blob.
Behold,
Here's the blob.
it's right here. The work project is right where the mouse is pointing.
That's why.
Just there.
We could have done
Just at the outside.
thinner GIS line there.
This one is not my fault. This is the state. This is the state's GIS line.
Yeah.
So the work area is just at the edge of this NDDB area. So there's wood turtles in here. It's almost all of these are wood turtles. This one is wood turtles. This one is wood turtles. This one.
Which- They
Oh, sorry.
might get federally listed. which
This one is wood turtles.
Mm.
cause problems.
Is there?
Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Very well.
Hurry up and get your project done.
Thank you for yours. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good luck with everything.
Good night.
Good night.
Guys, man.
Where are they in that? There's not been a petition for listing, has there? There has been a
They're
petition.
supposed to come out with a decision this year.
To list the wood turtle.
The word on the street is it's gonna get listed as threatened, but I don't know how
Did,
reliable that is.
my pressing question is, did the Hanson Pond Dam restoration come to this committee? So it was before I got here, but it was maybe 4 or 5 years before.
I
How
don't
long did-
recall, yeah, I don't recall that.
Because that was not in kind, that was found to be found defunct or needed to be.
Yeah, that needed a lot of
And they like completely rebuilt the dam.
Yeah.
Where is that?
This is Hanson's
Oh,
Pond.
on Wormwood Hill.
Sounds familiar. Oh,
And so
Wormwood.
this-
Oh, yeah. I don't remember seeing that.
It used to be, it was basically just like this. It was an old stone foundation, earthen dam with a stone wall.
Very narrow
stone
spillway.
finish, but the spillway had been reinforced with concrete in the
Hmm.
earlier part of the 20th century. And then it was found to be found to be completely in disarray. And then the owner had to pay for the entire project.
Now, I'm looking at this, I think this is the repair and this is 2019.
No, I think it's older. I maybe just
Yeah, 'cause we both have
misremembering.
been here.
Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, so let me turn on the new one.
Anyway, so this
wasn't
project
sure
has brought
now.
that one to mind.
I think
Because
it
it's
just would
like,
have been the two. of
what
us.
is-
I don't.
you know,
remember seeing-
I assume we would see all of these.
But I don't remember like
But
the
I
first
I don't know.
2 or 3 years of being on this
Probably-
panel
so I probably looked
because
at it
of
like,
That's a
I have
good-
no idea.
pandemic and I was
Yeah.
sick and I don't remember most of it.
I moved there in 2000, it must have been before.
I moved here in 2012 and it definitely was a few years of being a stone.
Yeah.
A dry laid stone spillway
Yeah.
before they did all that work.
But
But
it-
it was pre-COVID, right? They did that.
Yeah, it was, we moved there in 2017, so it was definitely before us moving there.
It was done before you moved in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I want to say it was like 14 or 15. So anyways, this project brought that to mind, because like,
Mhm.
and then the context around the state of like, when they do the dam fixes, they might drain the whole
Yeah.
pond and let the sediment just wash out.
Yeah,
And
So yeah,
then-
this goes back to something that came up like 2 years ago when Quentin was still on here and I don't think you were here yet, Michael.
I was not, I joined February 2023. was when I
Okay.
got here.
So the town was doing some, they were redoing some stormwater catch basin outfall work on Chafeeville. And Quentin's question was like, how come that didn't come before these committees in town? And so my question is like, my assumption has always been that everything comes through at least IWA and gets referred to us.
Mhm.
So it sounds like that's maybe not the case, but that's one question. And then my second question is, I always assume that every project that would come before us has a sort of a field-based delineation or mapping of resource areas, and that
Sure.
doesn't seem to be the case either. So I'm not.
So
the
when you
question-
say, yeah, no, this is a good question, because I wanna understand what I think you're saying, and then with regards to field-based resource areas. So we can talk about this project with regards to what was provided, right? So the applicant had an old survey, which showed the edge of the pond, which was at that time field delineated. And
and what- More than 5 or 10 years.
oh, much older. This was much older. So that was the edge of the pond.
I think it was probably a 40-year-old survey. But the applicant had an old survey showing the location of the edge of that pond and the location of the spillway. And came in and we checked the NDDB, and it seemed to me, based on my read of it, that it ends here. But it's very hard to tell. The pond clearly isn't. The road is. So it's happening right at the perimeter here. We've got, when I look at the wetlands layer itself, right? So our layers are a mess in here. All right, this is the real biggest problem for me, is when I'm trying to determine these things in the field, I go out and I look, but I'm not a wetland scientist. So I know what wetlands vegetation looks like, but I'm not taking sediment cores out there to actually check for wetland soils. Obviously my layers are messed up. So when I go in and I look for what's likely, if it's very obvious to me that there's wetlands up here, you can see the wetlands finger as it comes down the hill. But in terms of, is there any other wetland resource on the properties where a vehicle is going to be staged or anything like that? I don't think so.
Do you have the
Um,
soils on,
let's
you have
talk-
soils on there, right?
We do the soils, so we have.
But rather than talking about this project, can we talk about just
Hydric soils,
the-
pick the last one.
the process in general?
No, soils, no.
Oh, so that's how the one, so that's the same as the one.
It's also not great, but yes, so let's talk about process, let's.
So I'm just, it sounds like when projects come in that you and the town provide basically a service to the applicant to help them understand some of the things that we need, which is like, is there an NDDB area?
Mhm.
Are there additional wetlands that make it a more complicated site, either for access or for potential impacts to wetlands or water courses? Is that what I'm understanding from you?
Yes, so that's pretty much exactly my job. So of my many jobs, is that somebody comes in. So Mr. Dagan is a former employee of the town, used to be our fire chief.
I knew that name
So.
sounded familiar.
Yep, so he was our fire chief until earlier this year. So while he was still working here, he came down to talk to me a few times about how does this process go? Because he needs to get this done. So I explained to him all the stuff that he needs to do to apply, the materials he has to get together, the questions he needs to answer on his application, what I'm going to need from the contractor at a minimum, in terms of what the area we're working on. I'm going to want photographs, an explanation for the commission, explain the process, and explain what I think he's going to need.
When is it decided that an applicant needs an actual wetland scientist out there as opposed to that sort of guidance?
So the Inland Wetlands Agency, so just to pull up the wetlands regulations here, just as a couple of things for when do we require a wetlands permit, versus when do we not require a wetlands permit. I have a whole thing later on in today's session, which I spent some time on, which is called What's Legally Required. And it is basically a whole run through of how this works and why I do the things I do with permitting. But to speak more broadly, the reason that we often don't wind up requiring maintenance of certain drainage pipes to get a wetlands permit is subsection F of the permitted uses as of right is maintenance of existing drainage pipes which existed before 1974, provided such pipe is on property zoned as residential and does not contain hydrophytic vegetation. So
Are we calling this project that we just?
no, not at all.
maintenance?
This is about
Okay.
certain culvert repairs and maintenance that happens on roadsides. So you have the edge of a road that's on residential property. That is our culvert that we own. We're going to maintain it and we have the right to.
Does replacement?
A full
constitute-
pull out? No, we have to come in for that. But if you're going to do a full pull out of the culvert and drop it, we do need permits for that. And whenever there's going to be an install of, for example, a sidewalk near a wetland or that's going to involve major regrading, that comes to my office and then it goes to the commission if I think it's going to be relatively major. Now, in terms of what is this and what is required here, generally speaking, if you want a full wetlands delineation for a project, The thing that the wetlands delineation does for, in my view, is it clarifies where wetlands actually are in areas that have been previously developed, particularly because hydric soils often persist under your developed area. And when you haven't had a site surveyed in the past, it tells you where they are. If you're trying to get at why didn't I ask for a new updated wetlands delineation on this project? Why was that not guidance I provided? That is because we were working in a very concentrated area with a known watercourse here, with clearly defined limits of stone, dam, stone road. This isn't like you're gonna put up a new house and I'm gonna destroy a whole bunch of existing natural forest and then I'm gonna put my house wherever I want. This is, I have an existing thing that I'm replacing in the same location as I have it. And it's gonna be a short duration project and it's repair on a dam. To me, that isn't, first, it's not affecting any of the other wetlands uphill.
I think Will made a good point that the drawdown could affect, I mean, I think we're fine as we are. And I agree that it's local, and also I think could make the argument that drawing the pond down could mobilize, could incise the stream up top, mobilize sediment. Could have more sediment. I mean, I think the wetland downstream is gonna absorb everything anyway. But it's just, we get into a very subjective place and I trust you, so I'm not like trying to say I don't trust your review process. But what about when we get to an applicant that wants to, or could there be applicants that want to game the system a little bit and not get a delineation? I mean, are we?
Yes,
able
absolutely.
to say, we're not moving you forward until
Yes.
you get a delineation?
Yeah, the Wetlands Commission absolutely has the authority to do that. So among the things the Wetlands Commission can ask for, is application requirements. Application shall contain all such information as is necessary for a fair informed determination by the agency. All applicants are advised to consult with the agent before submitting. All comments of the agent are advisory. At a minimum, you need a whole bunch of information about where you are and your site plan and what's going on, but you can also require much more information than just a general plan of the site. You can require 1 inches 40 or 1 inches 20 plans, which have specifically delineated watercourse boundaries, land contours, property ownership, land. We can require all of that. It's just at commission discretion. I will require that for any new construction. I require it for land clearing. I have, for example, we have a house that has been in, it's a pending permit. It's been on my desk for like 9 months because something goes wrong with this project. New and fun every time I think that the plan set is done. But it's actually just down the road here. And I'll tell you about it because this is all public record. It's this property right here. So this property here, there is a plan to build a house on the front part of this property.
It's a Bob Moskowitz.
Yep, this is a piece of property owned by Mr. Moskowitz. This property, as you can kind of see, steep hill, wetlands, actually usable land. But our requirement that there be a 50-foot buffer from a wetland where natural vegetation is maintained meant that I asked Mr. Moskowitz to get a new wetlands delineation on this because it's not clear to me where the wetlands is when I go out in the field and look at it, and then when I am actually looking at a plan on the map.
Aaron, is that where we were?
This is just north of
I don't-
Laurel
No, or
We did an easement.
Lane.
We did-
oh,
I don't wanna get into names, but we did an easement.
So this wetland system, right, this is fringe to the river itself. And so this is a very sensitive ecosystem.
so did he buy that recently?
I don't believe so. I believe, well, I don't actually know anything because I've only been here a
That's
year and a
not-
half.
Yeah, I think we should keep.
1993.
This is
General
public
and
record,
not
but let's.
Specific to people.
Regardless,
Probably, I mean.
regardless, you talk about
Barbara
this
Vaughn,
one.
we love Barbara Vaughn.
That's what
Regardless,
the
with this
easement
one,
hearing.
anytime we have new construction, I ask for wetlands delineation.
I was. I guess.
I think one thing that would be fair to ask for culvert repairs, even for this in the future, would be a watershed delineation. I think that's absolutely fair. And it's actually not particularly onerous to produce, considering we have all the various sub basins that can show you what you're looking at with regards to your drainage basins. The other thing we always try to do from a staff standpoint is we don't try to massively amplify costs when we don't expect we're gonna gain any information. And this is one of those situations where if I ask for wetlands delineation on the edge of that pond, that's $1,000 to $1,500 to hire a wetland scientist to come out and delineate that for their time. But I have a pretty good idea of where the pond edge is. And I could definitely ask for a value study of that wetland. But that wetland is also a Doug Farm pond. And so that
It'd
has,
still be just full of threatened species, you know, the Doug Farm Pond.
of course, we know that the NDDB area is across the street.
That's only, that's a pretty coarse level.
We had a
assessment.
question
Sure.
about this with the, was it the golf course property, where they're like, oh, it's just a man-made pond. And it was like, well, a pond's a pond's a pond.
That's all my work is I can say, this is a stormwater swale, and so, well, if it's got the 3 criteria. it's a
Right, it's a
wetland.
wetland.
Yeah, so I gotta put flags on it, so yeah, I mean,
Yep.
it's, regardless of how it got there it is.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things where I didn't anticipate this work would cause any harm. This is definitely a thing.
Sorry.
This is a project where I didn't anticipate from my review that this work would cause any harm. And I thought it was actually almost purely positive in terms of taking the outlet and turning it into riprap as opposed to concrete is getting closer to a natural stream condition. Getting those trees off, and Chad's absolutely right. It's like, yeah, we don't want natural vegetation coming down, except for the course that this has to come down, because otherwise the dam's function is compromised. So there's always a risk with drawdowns that we have these happen. I don't know if you all remember that I worked in Winchester before this, which is a huge lake town. There's a big lake, and they do an 8-foot drawdown of their lake every 4 winters, such that people can repair their lake walls. And so huge amounts of lake bed get exposed, and people put up coffer dams to do work on their house foundations that are cantilevered over the water. And this place is very built up. Very built up. It's become, it's referred to as, they get a huge bathtub effect because so much of the shoreline has been hardened that as boats rip through, it causes, that lake is not in good position. Conversely, I think simply the fact that the property owner is 100% on board with putting up a cofferdam in the case that this is too high, and is otherwise willing to just wait for the water level to drop such that there's no water exposure, and came in with that, as opposed to me having to say it, does indicate just a very good sense of no water is going to be in this area while we work. We're going to make sure it's high and dry. And as long as that
What is
happens.
the cost increase with the cofferdam? What is the cost of?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's not insubstantial because you've got to lug the steel frames that get put into the site and put them up.
Not just like so they don't use like a sandbag kind of cofferdam?
No, you can use sandbags, but water will pass through them if you want, something that's truly gonna be the most preventable. I mean, you need stuff at the edges if you can't make a perfect seal, but
Yeah.
those the good stretch sheets will do more.
Online estimates are quite expensive.
Are you worried about money? Or are you worried about?
I'm
turtles
learning.
and stuff?
I'm trying to
Well, I'm
understand
sure it's an
what I don't know.
price. There's already.
I don't want to add delineations for folks that are already putting out a lot of money to do this kind of work. But, our charge is protecting resources and, mobilizing sediment, changing the geometry or aperture or elevation of a spillway can have overall changes to the whole upstream and maybe the downstream. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sensitive to like adding cost to somebody and slowing down their construction timeline, but I mean, that's the role we play, that's our primary concern is to push on these things.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And I will say, my job is not to save townspeople money by not making them bring in things that we should have information on.
It's pretty fair to request a wetlands functions and values coming off from a wetland scientist. And I can ask for those for any ponds that we have come forward in the future, because it's absolutely fair. Ponds that are dug are still ponds. Unless you've, got it in the middle of a muddy horse field and nothing lives in it because it's utterly contaminated, it could very well fulfill important values.
And something came up in there and I want to speak about it generally. For pond owners to treat their water, is that something they need?
From me,
State
you,
or-
state, there's state permitting for those. I get a notification whenever there is going to be any sort of herbicide application in the town, but that is handled entirely above our level.
And
Curious
you,
about the muck, like what
He didn't,
that
right.
meant,
oh, it's a,
Aerators are also not regulated by us.
yeah,
That's
but my
deep.
sense is, and again, he's not here, so I'm wary to talk about his specific comments. I just want to talk about it in general.
yeah.
If people are putting treatments into their ponds, it's likely that people are doing that without getting signed off on whoever they're supposed to get that signed off on.
Almost certainly. What I can do is I do receive notifications when there is going to be treatment from reputable treatment. And so those come into my handbox. I can just put those in the reports that I have for you
It's the
guys.
other, I'm more worried about the people doing it.
I would be far more worried about that as well. I just don't know.
Bag of wheat into your pond.
And also, to be clear, this is part of the water course. This isn't not an agricultural pond that's just dug in a hill slope.
Yeah, no, it's
With no
flowing
connection, it's
through.
flowing through, so it's like, I was shocked to see that you could even do that. To what is effectively the active.
To treat?
Yeah. the
Well, I
active treat.
mean, yeah, I mean, you can go down to
I
the
know,
fence right now
I
and
know.
throw something in and nobody knows about it.
Well, I
right?
do,
So-
I do.
Me too.
Hey, wait.
If we didn't have, we often get busy with so many other things, but there's definitely education opportunities like that in town to like get pond owners to realize like, hey, if you're gonna be putting, certain things in your water body, you should be reaching out to these entities for approval or something like that.
It sounds like there are companies that are subscribed to do this kind of thing, so one would hope the companies doing it are.
Is that
That's
his,
what
was
was
that his?
qualifying.
that-
Yeah,
that
so
somebody
he
doing-
said that they have someone that they
Okay.
go to
That's-
each
So they're a
year
licensed-
to do it,
they're
and
licensed
I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Muck
Okay.
control is just chemical application
Yeah,
or
so
what
that's-
it entails.
That's
but-
reassuring.
Well, to me,
They
muck control,
scoop
you're
out
digging
from the middle.
out.
Right,
Right, but no,
it's
it's not.
I didn't know what
So-
that meant.
It's
I was
a,
like, I don't know.
What's, it's like a flocculant that causes
that-
it to coagulate and drop to the bottom, I think, and not stay in the water.
Oh.
So that seems like it would impact the sediment then, long term, and would.
Yeah.
It
But
might accelerate
Need a full
eutrophication, but
Need to be out there. That.
Well, I didn't.
you just did a permit, so if you want
Well,
to
That's
get
the
his property.
thing, I was like, maybe I should go car.
I'd be interested to know what companies are doing that and if the companies are operating within whatever.
If you want to go core it, I'm sure he'd be amenable. He's a very nice man.
I
But
have a class right now.
I know you do. By the way, I signed your permit for your class to do this stuff.
Where are you
today, so
coring?
Bicentennial Pond.
Oh, boy. I'd be interested to see what that comes.
It's filled in with stuff.
Yeah, I bet.
Lots of stuff. All right, we do have several other items
Yeah.
on our agenda.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's,
We skipped item A in the.
we had a
wetland.
whole other
Update
item there. I
report.
don't know what that was, but thank you for answering those questions, Michael. So yeah, let's go back up to 5A. These are Michael's Asian approvals.
Yep, this was just everything that I had done as of last Thursday when I put together the packet. Not a lot going on in late August. I haven't had a lot of permits. I've just been reviewing a lot of zoning permits, which are not close enough to wetlands. We had two mobile manufactured home replacements up on Rolling Hills. And then the other one is a septic system at the public library. So this is a situation where, yes, they do get permits. Here's one now. So the Mansfield Public Library has two different septic systems for the two different septic fields in the library. This one is needed a leach field replacement, and the current septic system was actually under the parking lot, which turns out less than ideal. So that's being fixed now. And
They're digging it up or they're just gonna leave it as?
I'm not sure. It might just be left as boxes, disconnect it, leave it as stable as opposed to crush it and then just bring in more backfill. But that's now being put behind the parking area, behind the shed that exists on the western side. So 50 feet separation distance leaves the trees on the hill and the separation from the wetlands. The health district looked at it, and I spoke specifically with the sanitarian who designed it, because in general, when you don't have very much separation distance, if you're on a hill, I'm always curious about how much distance is the water going to cover as you're seeping into the ground in terms of transit of nitrates and other waste products. But he provided all of the numbers over to health, and I looked at them with health, and it seems like everything has plenty of separation distance for safety too.
There's some very porous soils around.
Yes, there are.
Yanceville Hollow. I don't know if they go over as far as that, the library area.
So that's gonna be right by the trail to Buchanan Woods, sounds
Let
like.
me show you.
Joshua
So-
Strauss, yeah.
Yep. So this one is located, so New Skill Elementary School.
That's gonna be right there.
So it's located here. So the septic tank is here and then the leach field is here. It's behind this. And so they had to cut down a couple of trees in order to make this work. But they've got this whole hill, which is very steep,
Yeah.
stays.
It's a kettle, it's a kettle.
So this area here is where that's gonna be. Unfortunately, because this is so steep, the vertical separation is very good. So that helps with the numbers of sanitary sewer. Unfortunately, I don't know as much about sewer connections as I am learning that I probably should. So it's one of those areas I'm learning more about.
Let's go downhill. Go downhill. Thank you, doctor.
Get go to school right now.
Will can help you.
For a long time.
I had to go to school, how to model the rates of flow.
Downhill.
Thank you for that update, Michael. Absolutely. Would you like to jump to?
Sure, and this
the,
is.
Other things?
So this is something that we don't have to do today. But this is something that this commission has several times had a lot of questions about why the commissions do things in the way they do.
We don't have that
And
question.
if you don't have that question, because learning is for nerds, a whole bunch of teachers here, then we don't have to do that, and that's totally fine. I don't have to run through this. You can just peruse this yourselves. But what I tried to do, and you don't have to do that either. What I tried to do is I tried to kind of lay out why the commissions function in the order they do based on statute, because a lot of the things that you have pointed out, the collective you have pointed out along the way about, like, it seems kind of silly that this isn't connected. I know, for example, John has a whole bunch of things about seeps and springs and the protections of seeps and springs and what's classified as wetlands versus what isn't in Connecticut. And so all of these things are kind of just come directly out of statute. And so if you want, I can quickly run through this. I know it's 40 slides.
I was like, reinforce.
I don't have to do it that way. This is the
I'm
comprehensive.
just wondering if John should be here with us.
Well, that's the thing, is there's 5 of you here. I can just circulate this, people can ask questions, but
What would you like to do? I mean, would you like to wait for more people or
I
would you
can.
like to run through it? I mean, you put a lot of work into it. Would you like to go through it?
I feel like I would benefit from hearing it explained, although I hate to say that to everybody else. Who might not.
I'm in agreement with
Okay.
Miranda, because I think that this is could possibly, obviously a tremendous amount of information. But I think it helps us understand our roles better. And can help us kind of maybe dig into some of the questions that we've been having. So my vote, and not just because of the time, but because we have 3 commission members that aren't present,
Mhm.
is that we put this on the next meeting if we don't
Sure.
unless there's too much business for that.
I would really like to be able to ask questions as we go through it,
Yeah.
to have the discussion, because that's how I'm actually figuring this stuff out.
Absolutely. Might help us to also, if we all do some homework and look at it before we
Mhm.
do
Look at
something.
me.
There's a lot of information here. One of the things I often find with conservation commissions, because not just you, is a lot of times conservation commissions ask questions. What the hell are we actually supposed to do? And so it's implied. So
Let's not,
the,
I know what we're doing.
What do you do?
there's actually 18 distinct things that conservation commissions are empowered to do. And on the regular, we do 3 of them. So if people are, you don't, most of them are, most of them,
Power we're not using.
you have power you're not using. That's one of the, that's one of the important takeaways. That's one of the important takeaways from that presentation.
And needs some power.
If you want to do it now, if I've lured you with the promise of power, mostly because sometimes you're like, we don't feel like we have any ability to do anything to actually make change. There are specific things that are delegated to the Conservation Commission. So projects that you can choose to take. Anyway, we don't have to do that today. We can just move it to old business.
That's, my vote's to move it to old business, because I feel like, we definitely have meetings where there might not be a business item, or it's a light business item. And I think if you put a lot of work into it, we need to acknowledge that and have everybody, as many people present to see it, discuss it as possible.
Sure.
I second.
It is kind of a motion, but be a purely parliamentary procedure. Yes, the motion to table.
Let's give it a couple
Alright.
meetings, but if we end up with a meeting where, I don't know, it's hard to get us all here, I guess.
I was
It seems
gonna say, like,
that is
before,
the
like,
general-
I know I won't be here next month, so
Yeah.
it's like.
I can
Um,
also give it multiple
Let's
times.
give it
So
a,
you-
what, our moratorium ends when? again?
December 31st.
But let's try to do it before then, right, before, because then it seems like we might have a queue of projects.
Maybe. I mean, the Fed just cut rates 0.5% today, and that's a big deal for freeing up assets that will allow projects to begin and for people to start submitting. As much as I think the moratorium has played a role in slowing development down, I think the fact that money becoming expensive was a huge deal, and the fact that we weren't seeing applications as
I
well.
mean, a moratorium is pretty.
Oh, yeah, you can't do anything. You can't do anything, but the fact that 3 of the
money could be
4
falling out of the sky,
projects
so.
still haven't started. 3 of the 4
That
approved
were
projects
approved.
that were approved still haven't started.
Yeah, that's.
Is because
interesting.
between the time they started and now, they can no longer finance it.
Mm.
So,
So you're correct, this is a business item, and so I'm gonna move to table the presentation for a forthcoming meeting.
I'll second.
Okay,
yeah,
Second, your second.
Well, no. I seconded it.
we're serious here.
Oh.
People
We're
online.
special
do we
affiliated.
vote on a table or it just gets tabled?
With unanimous consent, there doesn't need to be a vote, and it doesn't seem like anyone's
It's
protesting.
unanimous.
Okay.
Any reports from members on anything? Is anybody thinking of going to the Kakiwik? I don't think I'm going to be going, but I'm not sure.
When was it again?
It's November.
I didn't say anything. I just say no in my face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
16th, I think it's.
No, Saturday, November 16th.
Maybe.
Oh, do we
I'm
have
like-
do we have an easement monitoring?
We do on the
20,
28th, morning of the 28th, 9 AM on the 28th. That is also Celebrate Mansfield Day, so if you are
You can celebrate by doing these about it.
it's 2 to 6 in the downtown. But yes, the 28th is the day that 4 people said they could make it. And
And I
that's,
said, no, I don't think so, but I think I can now make it.
That's good, because I cannot.
It's
make
my
it.
daughter's
So
birthday
it's-
party, apparently I have to be there.
you know what, understandable.
I forget which one I said, the 29th and 29th. I know I can make both days.
But the 28th, so I sent those letters out. That's the other 4 easements
on the
that on
that
the
I
other
didn't
side
get
that you
to.
didn't get to. So
I'll skip the other thing that I'm supposed to do.
Oh, you wanna do it so bad?
It's a cleanup on the
I
Connecticut
can look
River.
into that meeting.
Oh, ours will be more fun.
I will be there, so.
So I wouldn't be the only
So
person.
you will not be the only, you are not a complete stranger going to the wetlands conference. I will be at that wetlands conference.
Okay, thank you. So that's September 28th at
9 AM.
9 AM. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if they're yet.
Send those letters back out.
I'm
So
gonna have
I'm
to-
pretty sure I can be there. It sounds like Will can be there. Erin, you're there.
I'm
I
there.
think I indicated I would be there. I think I.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
What theme do you got? Is there a theme?
There is a theme, there's always a theme.
Naturally.
Add
Naturally.
Miranda's kid's birthday to the agenda, would you please?
We're gonna crash it after.
There are easements
Honoring.
just behind your house. We can change the easement
This is
monitor.
this is a report from a member, I guess.
Theme is Gabby Cats.
What's a Gabby?
What? I don't
Dare
know.
I ask?
Gabby's dollhouse,
Okay.
cats themed.
Sounds great.
Kids,
I'm far from that.
Okay.
Sphere now.
Yep.
Any other communications? Your meetings are, we've got a September 28th easement monitoring and presumably our regular meeting on October 16th. And we making a motion to adjourn at 8:43.
Like the second, so moved as a second. And that is 3 people, so that's.
I thirded it. and
A
seconded it,
motion to adjourn just needs to be seconded. and
It
goes
was.
into effect.
8:42.
yeah. Aaron seconded. it.
Really good, the discussion of the minute.
Can you stop recording?
Yes, I can.
Well, yeah, we didn't make any changes, so.